The galaxy was a vast, peaceful place, filled with different planets and civilizations, each thriving in its own way. But that peace was shattered one day when a mysterious virus began spreading. It came from nowhere. At first, it seemed like a regular flu, something people could easily get over. But soon, its true nature was revealed. The virus was far deadlier than anyone had imagined. It spread faster than anyone could stop it, moving from one planet to another, infecting every living being it touched. There were no warnings, no signs until it was too late. The virus had no cure, no vaccine, and no one could stop it. On Earth, panic spread as quickly as the virus. Hospitals were overwhelmed, and the government declared a state of emergency. People were scared. Families were torn apart as those who became infected quickly showed symptoms and then died within hours. The cities became ghost towns with only the sick and the dying left behind. Scientists and doctors worked day and night to try and find a cure, but every effort failed. The virus mutated faster than they could understand it. Nothing made sense. It seemed unstoppable, and every attempt to stop it only made it stronger. As the weeks went by, the world began to change. The virus didn't just affect humans. It was taking out entire species across the galaxy. Planets that had once been home to millions of people and aliens alike were now empty, their once thriving cities now abandoned. Many species were dying, and entire ecosystems were collapsing. The galaxy was in chaos. Space travel became dangerous, and communication between planets was almost impossible. With each passing day, more and more people fell ill, and the virus spread further into the unknown corners of the galaxy. But then, something strange happened. On Earth, in the midst of the panic, something unexpected began to occur. Some humans weren't dying. At first, no one noticed the small group of people who seemed to be immune to the virus. It was only after the virus had taken hold of most of the population that it became clear. These individuals were not sick. They didn't show symptoms. They didn't fall ill. Instead, they grew stronger. It wasn't just that they survived. It was that they were thriving. Their bodies seemed to adapt in a way no one had ever seen before. Their senses were sharper, their strength increased, and they began to heal from minor injuries faster than they ever could before. Scientists were baffled. They tested the immune people, but there was no explanation. They had the same DNA as everyone else, yet they seemed completely unaffected by the virus. It didn't take long for this new group to realize they were different. They didn't feel sick. In fact, they felt better than they ever had. They could see things more clearly, hear things from far away, and even sense changes in the air. They could move faster, think quicker, and their strength was beyond anything they had ever known. As days passed, more humans began to show signs of these strange changes. What had once been a rare occurrence was now spreading. People who had previously been ordinary found themselves gaining powers they couldn't explain. The virus was still ravaging the world, but these humans were different. They were no longer the same. It seemed as though the virus had triggered something within them, something deep inside their genetic makeup. It wasn't a simple infection. It was evolution. Humanity was changing, evolving into something entirely new, and no one knew what the consequences would be. At first, it was a mystery, a strange and exciting twist in an otherwise bleak situation. No one could understand what was happening, but it was clear that these evolved humans were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. However, the excitement of newfound power quickly turned to fear. While some embraced the changes, others began to wonder if the virus was somehow controlling them, pushing humanity in a direction it couldn't stop. Were they evolving, or were they being manipulated by the virus? What if this change was just the beginning? What if there was something far worse waiting? Meanwhile, the governments of Earth and other planets were in panic mode. They had no idea what was happening, and they saw the rise of these new humans as a threat. The evolved humans were strong, yes, but they didn't have answers. They were as confused as everyone else. And with their newfound abilities, it wasn't long before suspicion and fear grew. The governments began to crack down on the survivors, treating them like dangerous animals. Soldiers were sent to capture those who had evolved, fearing that they could be the cause of the virus's spread. But the evolved humans had other plans. They refused to be hunted like animals, and with their enhanced abilities, they fought back. The fight between the evolved humans and the governments of Earth escalated quickly. Cities that had once been safe were now battlegrounds. The streets became filled with fear and tension, and every day brought more violence. No one knew who could be trusted anymore. The very people who had once been your neighbors and friends could now be hiding strange powers. The virus was still spreading, and even those who had changed were not safe. The virus seemed to have a life of its own. It mutated, constantly evolving, and no one knew how to stop it. Some feared that the virus wasn't just a disease. It was a tool, a catalyst to force the galaxy into a new order. As the virus continued to ravage the galaxy, the survivors were forced to make difficult choices. Trust was in short supply, and the hope that the world could return to normal seemed more distant by the day. Humanity had changed. There was no going back. And with every passing day, the mystery deepened. What exactly had caused the virus to spread? Why were humans evolving? And most importantly, what would the galaxy look like when the dust finally settled? The first few days after the outbreak seemed like a nightmare, a virus no one could understand, sweeping across the galaxy and changing everything it touched. But those early days were just the beginning. The real question was, could humanity survive the virus, or had the virus only just begun? Would humans evolve into something stronger, something capable of saving the galaxy? Or would they be doomed, just like so many other species, lost to the endless void of space? As the outbreak raged on, the survivors held on to a sliver of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they would find a way to fight back. But for now, the galaxy was on the brink of total collapse, and no one knew how much time they had left. As the days passed, it became clearer that humanity was not simply surviving the virus, but evolving into something completely new. The virus, which had swept across the galaxy with terrifying speed, had somehow unlocked hidden potential in human DNA, turning ordinary people into extraordinary beings. It wasn't just the physical changes that were remarkable, though they were hard to ignore. The evolved humans exhibited heightened senses, enhanced strength, and quicker reflexes. But there was more, much more. These humans began to show abilities that seemed almost supernatural. Some could heal faster than anyone thought possible, while others discovered they could communicate with one another without speaking. It was as if the virus had awakened something ancient in their biology, something dormant that no one knew existed. At first, the changes were subtle. A person who had once struggled with a common cold now found they could recover in hours. A woman who had been too weak to lift a heavy box found that she could now lift entire crates with ease. But the effects didn't stop there. These evolved humans could run faster than the fastest sprinter, and their senses were like that of animals, keen, sharp, and alert to everything around them. People started to notice that they didn't tire the way they used to. They could push themselves to the limits and still keep going, as if they were always at the peak of physical condition. What started as a strange and isolated occurrence soon turned into something widespread. More and more humans began to show signs of evolution. It wasn't just one or two individuals. It was entire communities, cities, and even countries where people were transforming. Some scientists, eager to understand what was happening, collected blood samples and ran tests, but nothing they discovered offered any clear answers. The virus, they learned, wasn't just a disease. It was a trigger, activating a latent part of humanity's genetic code that had been hidden for millennia. It was as if the virus had rewired human biology in an effort to save them, creating a new form of human capable of surviving the virus and whatever else the galaxy could throw at them. But with these new powers came new problems. As humans grew stronger and more capable, they began to fear their own abilities. Some feared they would lose control, that the powers they had gained would turn them into something dangerous. Others worried about the implications of the virus itself. What had caused it to spread so quickly? Was it a natural occurrence, or was there something more sinister at work? And why were only humans affected in this way? As the virus continued to ravage the galaxy, those who had evolved tried to stay focused on survival, but fear began to creep into their hearts. Was this really a gift or a curse? The governments of Earth and other planets, which had once been in control, were now in chaos. With the rise of these powerful new humans, it seemed that the old order could not hold. Those in power were either dead or too sick to lead. In their place, the evolved humans began to rise. They had the strength, the intelligence, and the will to take control of their own future. But that control was not easily accepted. Those who were not affected by the virus, or those who had not evolved in the same way, saw the new humans as a threat. Fear and distrust spread quickly, and it wasn't long before the world began to fracture into two opposing sides: the evolved humans and those who resisted. As cities crumbled and governments fell, the survivors realized that they could no longer rely on the old systems to keep them safe. They had to adapt to this new world or risk being wiped out by the virus, or worse, by the chaos that was beginning to take over. While the evolved humans tried to offer help and protection, their new powers only made others more fearful. Resistance groups formed, determined to stop the spread of this new evolution. They saw the evolved humans as a danger to the future of humanity, believing that the virus was not just transforming people, it was controlling them. They wanted to find a way to reverse the changes and return things to the way they had been, but they didn't know if that was even possible. As the situation grew more tense, the galaxy watched in horror as one planet after another fell. The virus, now mutating in new and unpredictable ways, continued to spread across the stars. Those who had evolved found themselves caught in the middle of a war they didn't start, but one they were now a part of. The questions remained: could they control their new abilities? Could they save the galaxy from total destruction? Or had the virus simply created something too dangerous to survive? The evolved humans were in a race against time, trying to find a way to use their new powers to help others, while also understanding what was happening to them. They needed to find a solution to the virus, but they couldn't do it alone. They had to learn to work together, despite the growing mistrust and fear. But even as they struggled to understand their new abilities, the virus was still evolving. With each passing day, it became harder to predict what would happen next. Would the humans be able to overcome the virus, or would they become something else entirely? Only time would tell. In the midst of this chaos, one thing became clear: humanity had been changed forever. The evolution brought on by the virus was irreversible, but whether this transformation was for better or for worse was a question that no one could answer yet. As the galaxy descended further into chaos, the question on everyone's mind was simple: what would the future hold for humanity? Would they emerge from this crisis as something stronger, more united, or would they fall victim to the very virus that had started it all? As the evolved humans stood at the edge of this new reality, they realized that their survival depended on something far greater than their newfound abilities. It would take more than strength and power to save the galaxy. It would take hope, unity, and a belief that they could overcome the virus, and the fear that came with it, to build a new future for themselves and for those they loved. The galaxy had become a war zone, and no one knew who could be trusted anymore. The virus had changed everything, and now the world was divided between those who embraced the evolution brought on by the virus and those who feared it. The evolved humans, with their incredible powers, had become both saviors and threats. Their strength and abilities were unmatched, but so were the suspicions surrounding them. Some believed they were the key to saving the galaxy, while others saw them as the cause of its downfall. As the evolved humans tried to help the struggling survivors, the rest of the galaxy began to spiral into chaos. Governments had fallen, and the old systems that once held everything together were now nothing more than broken fragments of their former selves. What remained were the strong and the weak, and the divide between them only grew wider. The evolved humans, once ordinary people, now found themselves at the center of a growing war. The first signs of conflict had started with whispers, rumors of fear and distrust. Those who had not been infected by the virus, those who had not evolved, began to form groups. They claimed that the virus had manipulated the human race, that it wasn't just a disease but an agent of change, forcing humans into a new existence without their consent. The resistance, as they called themselves, was growing by the day. They saw the evolved humans as a threat to the future of humanity, believing that the virus had the power to control them, to turn them into something monstrous. At first, the evolved humans tried to reason with them. They didn't want to fight, didn't want to be seen as the enemy. They only wanted to help, to offer their strength and their knowledge to rebuild what had been destroyed. But the resistance was too afraid to listen. Fear turned to hatred, and hatred turned to violence. Soon, small skirmishes erupted into full-blown battles. The cities, once places of peace and hope, became battlegrounds where the evolved humans fought for survival, their newfound powers clashing with the weapons of the old world. Meanwhile, the virus continued to spread, mutating in ways that no one could understand. Scientists, both human and alien, struggled to find answers. The virus didn't just infect the body. It seemed to infect the mind as well, slowly eroding the will of those who were touched by it. The mutated versions of the virus that had begun to appear were even more deadly, even more contagious, and they spread like wildfire. No one was safe, not even the evolved humans. The once proud cities, now torn apart by war and disease, were beginning to crumble under the weight of the chaos. The sky was often darkened by smoke, and the streets were filled with the echoes of gunfire and the screams of the dying. The war had become a war of survival, with no clear end in sight. The governments of old, weakened and divided, could no longer hold their people together. It was up to the evolved humans to step up, to lead, but many were reluctant. They had seen what fear could do to people, and they didn't want to be part of the destruction. Yet the situation was growing more desperate every day, and they realized they had no choice. But even as they prepared for war, something else was happening, something that no one could have predicted. Among the evolved humans, a few began to show signs of change. They weren't just stronger or faster. They had begun to experience strange new abilities. Some could manipulate energy, while others found they could communicate with each other across vast distances without speaking. It was as if the virus was still evolving, not just within the humans, but within themselves. The question now was whether these changes would be the key to saving the galaxy, or whether they would be the final step toward their destruction. Despite the rising tension, the humans couldn't afford to fight each other for much longer. The virus was spreading, and every day it grew stronger. It wasn't just killing people, it was changing them, mutating their bodies in ways that defied all logic. The evolved humans were the galaxy's best hope, but they were also its greatest risk. If they couldn't find a way to work together, to use their powers for the greater good, then the galaxy would fall, and there would be no future left. The evolved humans knew that the time had come for them to make a choice. They could either keep fighting for control, struggling to prove their power, or they could unite and focus all their energy on fighting the virus that had caused all of this. The resistance had been fighting to stop the spread of the virus, but they didn't understand the true nature of the threat. The virus wasn't just an illness. It was a force that was shaping the future, a force that could either destroy everything or change it forever. With the virus mutating faster than anyone could keep up with, the evolved humans realized they had to act quickly. There was no time to waste. They would need to work together, not only to stop the virus, but to stop the war that was tearing the galaxy apart. If they failed, there would be nothing left. The galaxy would fall into darkness, and humanity would be lost forever. But the question remained, could the evolved humans put aside their differences and find a way to work together? Could they overcome the fear and distrust that had consumed the galaxy and unite for the greater good? The fate of the galaxy hung in the balance, and the evolved humans were its last hope. But time was running out, and the virus was still spreading. The battle for survival had only just begun. At first, the evolved humans tried to reason with them. They didn't want to fight, didn't want to be seen as the enemy. They only wanted to help, to offer their strength and their knowledge to rebuild what had been destroyed. But the resistance was too afraid to listen. Fear turned to hatred, and hatred turned to violence. Soon, small skirmishes erupted into full-blown battles. The cities, once places of peace and hope, became battlegrounds where the evolved humans fought for survival, their newfound powers clashing with the weapons of the old world. Meanwhile, the virus continued to spread, mutating in ways that no one could understand. Scientists, both human and alien, struggled to find answers. The virus didn't just infect the body. It seemed to infect the mind as well, slowly eroding the will of those who were touched by it. The mutated versions of the virus that had begun to appear were even more deadly, even more contagious, and they spread like wildfire. No one was safe, not even the evolved humans. The once proud cities, now torn apart by war and disease, were beginning to crumble under the weight of the chaos. The sky was often darkened by smoke, and the streets were filled with the echoes of gunfire and the screams of the dying. The war had become a war of survival, with no clear end in sight. The governments of old, weakened and divided, could no longer hold their people together. It was up to the evolved humans to step up, to lead, but many were reluctant. They had seen what fear could do to people, and they didn't want to be part of the destruction. Yet the situation was growing more desperate every day, and they realized they had no choice. But even as they prepared for war, something else was happening, something that no one could have predicted. Among the evolved humans, a few began to show signs of change. They weren't just stronger or faster, they had begun to experience strange new abilities. Some could manipulate energy, while others found they could communicate with each other across vast distances without speaking. It was as if the virus was still evolving, not just within the humans, but within themselves. The question now was whether these changes would be the key to saving the galaxy, or whether they would be the final step toward their destruction. Despite the rising tension, the humans couldn't afford to fight each other for much longer. The virus was spreading, and every day it grew stronger. It wasn't just killing people, it was changing them, mutating their bodies in ways that defied all logic. The evolved humans were the galaxy's best hope, but they were also its greatest risk. If they couldn't find a way to work together, to use their powers for the greater good, then the galaxy would fall, and there would be no future left. The evolved humans knew that the time had come for them to make a choice. They could either keep fighting for control, struggling to prove their power, or they could unite and focus all their energy on fighting the virus that had caused all of this. The resistance had been fighting to stop the spread of the virus, but they didn't understand the true nature of the threat. The virus wasn't just an illness. It was a force that was shaping the future, a force that could either destroy everything or change it forever. With the virus mutating faster than anyone could keep up with, the evolved humans realized they had to act quickly. There was no time to waste. They would need to work together, not only to stop the virus, but to stop the war that was tearing the galaxy apart. If they failed, there would be nothing left. The galaxy would fall into darkness, and humanity would be lost forever. But the question remained, could the evolved humans put aside their differences and find a way to work together? Could they overcome the fear and distrust that had consumed the galaxy and unite for the greater good? The fate of the galaxy hung in the balance, and the evolved humans were its last hope. But time was running out, and the virus was still spreading. The battle for survival had only just begun. The galaxy had been torn apart by war, fear, and disease, and now, in the wake of the chaos, the last hope for survival rested on the shoulders of the evolved humans. The virus that had ravaged the galaxy, altering the course of history, was still spreading. Its deadly mutations were taking a toll on both the newly evolved and those who remained unscathed. What was once a peaceful universe now lay on the brink of collapse, and the only way forward seemed uncertain. The evolved humans knew they had to act fast, but could they unite to fight the true enemy, the virus itself? As the situation worsened, leaders from different worlds began to gather. The galaxy, once divided, had no choice but to come together. The evolved humans, who had gained extraordinary abilities, were now seen as the key to survival. But trust was a fragile thing. Those who had resisted the changes brought on by the virus had only grown more suspicious, more fearful. They had seen the new humans as a danger to their world, and that fear hadn't disappeared. Now, with the galaxy teetering on the edge of destruction, the question remained, could the evolved humans help save it, or would their new powers lead them down a path that no one could control? The meetings were tense. Representatives from various species, some evolved and some not, argued bitterly. The resistance groups had grown in strength, refusing to trust the evolved humans. They believed the virus wasn't just changing the biology of humans, it was changing their very essence, their humanity. Some even feared that the virus would turn them into something unrecognizable, a force of destruction beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. Despite these fears, there was little choice but to work together. The virus was spreading faster than anyone could contain it. The galaxy was running out of time. The evolved humans, despite their powers, were just as desperate. They didn't want to become the monsters the resistance believed them to be. They had no idea what the future held or how to control the changes they were going through. They had no experience with the strange new abilities they were developing, and it was clear that they couldn't do this alone. The leaders of the evolved humans pushed for unity, knowing that the key to survival lay in working together. They formed alliances with other species who had not been affected by the virus, hoping that together they could find a solution. But trust was difficult to come by. Every step they took toward peace seemed to be met with more fear and resistance. In the midst of all this turmoil, a revelation came to light. Some of the evolved humans began to uncover the true nature of the virus. It wasn't just a random mutation or a biological accident. The virus had been engineered. Its purpose was not to destroy life, but to change it, to force the galaxy to evolve. It had been created by an advanced species long forgotten by the galaxy, a species that had disappeared before anyone could learn its secrets. This revelation sent shockwaves through the galaxy. What if the virus wasn't just a plague? What if it was part of a larger plan, a transformation designed to prepare the galaxy for something greater, something yet to come? As the evolved humans learned more about the virus's origins, they realized that their powers weren't just the result of a random mutation. They were part of a larger evolutionary process, one that could change the course of the galaxy forever. But the resistance groups weren't convinced. They saw the new humans' powers as a curse, something that could only bring destruction. They didn't care about the origins of the virus. They only cared about stopping it before it took everything from them. The tension between the two sides continued to grow. While the evolved humans pushed to find a cure, to understand the virus, the resistance fought to wipe out all traces of it. Neither side was willing to back down. Battles broke out on several planets, each side determined to prove their point. Cities that had once been symbols of peace and prosperity were now battlegrounds. The entire galaxy was at war, not just against the virus, but against the fear and distrust that had taken root. As the days turned into weeks, the galaxy's situation grew more dire. The virus continued to mutate, and the evolved humans discovered that the more they used their powers, the stronger the virus became. It was feeding off them, adapting to their abilities. Each battle against the virus seemed to make it more powerful, more unpredictable. The evolved humans were no longer just fighting to survive. They were fighting to stop a force that seemed unstoppable. But in the midst of all this chaos, a small group of evolved humans discovered a way to harness their powers. They found that by working together, combining their abilities in unique ways, they could control the virus, weaken its hold on the galaxy. It wasn't an easy task, and it required great sacrifice, but it was a glimmer of hope. The evolved humans realized that they weren't just the result of the virus. They were the key to stopping it. The galaxy began to unite, slowly but surely. The evolved humans reached out to their allies, including species that had once been enemies, asking for help. And in return, they offered their strength, their abilities, and their knowledge. As the unity grew, so did the hope that the virus could be defeated. But the resistance remained skeptical. They didn't trust the evolved humans. They believed that the virus had changed them beyond repair, that they were now something different, something dangerous. But even they couldn't deny that the evolved humans were the galaxy's best hope. It became clear that the only way to stop the virus and bring peace to the galaxy was to unite the evolved humans with the resistance. Only by working together could they hope to understand the virus and find a way to stop it before it destroyed everything. But the path to unity was not easy. Old wounds ran deep, and distrust lingered like a dark cloud over every negotiation. The evolved humans, aware of the tension, did everything they could to prove that they could be trusted. They shared their knowledge, worked with other species, and offered their help. Slowly, the resistance began to see the truth that the virus had not just changed humanity, but had made it stronger, more capable of surviving in a galaxy that was constantly evolving. The resistance began to see that the evolved humans weren't the enemy. They were humanity's best chance at survival. Finally, after much struggle, the two sides began to work together. They formed a coalition of evolved humans, resistance fighters, and alien species to take the fight to the virus itself. It wasn't going to be easy, but it was their only hope. The first step was to stop the virus from spreading further, then to find a way to cure it once and for all. The coalition knew that they were facing the greatest challenge the galaxy had ever seen, but they also knew that they had no choice but to succeed. In the face of overwhelming odds, hope began to bloom once more. The galaxy's future was uncertain, but the united front of evolved humans and their allies was ready to fight for it. With every step forward, they grew stronger, and with every victory, the galaxy inched closer to peace. The virus may have changed everything, but it would not be the end of humanity. It would be the beginning of something new, a new era where the galaxy could heal, evolve, and unite. The struggle wasn't over, but at least now, they were fighting together. And that, they knew, was the only way they could win. The galaxy was now a battlefield, with every corner of space feeling the weight of the war. But amid the chaos, the united front of evolved humans, resistance fighters, and alien species was beginning to make progress. Together, they had fought their way through countless skirmishes, uncovering more about the virus with every step they took. Each battle, each piece of knowledge they uncovered, brought them closer to finding a solution. Yet the virus was still relentless, mutating faster than anyone could predict, and time was running out. The once divided factions had come together, not out of choice, but necessity. The evolved humans, with their incredible powers, had begun to work alongside the resistance, showing them that their strength could be used to protect, not destroy. The resistance, while still skeptical of the changes the virus had wrought, began to see the reality. The virus wasn't just a threat to humanity. It was a force that had to be understood and stopped before it completely consumed the galaxy. Every battle fought against the virus itself was one step closer to unraveling the mystery behind its origins and purpose. They were learning that to stop the virus, they had to think differently, not just fight harder. At the heart of the alliance, a group of the most powerful evolved humans had come together, forming a team whose sole purpose was to track down the core of the virus. They knew that if they could isolate the source of the mutations, they could develop a cure, or at least, a weapon strong enough to contain it. These evolved humans, who had once feared their own powers, now recognized that they had to use them to save the galaxy, even if it meant confronting the very thing that had caused their transformation. Each mission they undertook became more dangerous as the virus adapted to their efforts. It was no longer just a disease. It was a living organism, evolving faster than any species had ever encountered. Some of the evolved humans could sense the virus, feel it moving through the galaxy like a dark shadow. Their powers had become attuned to its presence, which made them uniquely suited to track it down, but it also made them vulnerable. The virus seemed to feed off their energy, adapting to counteract their strengths. Every victory, every breakthrough, seemed to come at a price. The more they used their powers to fight the virus, the more it pushed back, making the task ahead even more daunting. However, the united front began to show signs of hope. The resistance, seeing the sacrifices made by the evolved humans, started to trust them more. They began working side by side, pooling their resources and knowledge to find a way to stop the virus. The evolved humans, once seen as dangerous and unpredictable, had now become symbols of hope. They were the galaxy's only chance at survival. The resistance leaders, who had once tried to fight them, now turned to them for answers, recognizing that it was only by using their newfound abilities that they stood a chance. But the struggle was not just external, it was internal as well. Many of the evolved humans still struggled with their powers. They had become stronger, faster, and more capable, but they had also become more alien to themselves. The virus had changed them in ways they couldn't fully understand, and every day they battled with their own fears. Would they become too powerful? Would they lose their humanity in the process? It was a question that haunted many of them. But as they worked together, as they shared their struggles and their successes, they began to realize something important. Their strength didn't come from their powers alone. It came from their unity, from their determination to protect the galaxy they had once called home. As the evolved humans and their allies pressed forward, they encountered the first real breakthrough. Deep within the heart of the virus, they discovered a hidden code, an ancient sequence embedded in the virus's DNA. It was the key to understanding its origin, a piece of a puzzle that had been lost to time. The virus, they realized, wasn't just a random mutation. It was part of a larger plan, a force meant to drive evolution forward. But the plan had gone awry. The virus had become too powerful, too uncontrollable. And now, the evolved humans were the only ones who could stop it. The team of evolved humans, along with their allies, set their sights on the core of the virus. They would have to travel deep into the heart of the galaxy, to a distant, forgotten world, where the original creators of the virus had once lived. This planet, long abandoned, held the answers they needed. But it was also a place of immense danger, a place where the virus was strongest. As they prepared for the mission, doubts and fears began to creep in. The galaxy's survival now rested on a delicate balance. Could they control their powers long enough to reach the core, or would they be consumed by the very force they were trying to destroy? The journey to the virus's source was fraught with challenges. The team encountered new mutations, creatures born from the virus's influence, each more dangerous than the last. But they pressed on, driven by the knowledge that they were the galaxy's last hope. With every step, the evolved humans grew stronger, more united. They had learned to control their powers, not just for themselves, but for the greater good. The resistance fighters, too, had become invaluable allies, offering their expertise and their courage in the face of unimaginable odds. They had become a family, a coalition of species and individuals working together for one purpose: to save the galaxy. Finally, they arrived at the heart of the virus's origin, a massive complex hidden beneath the surface of the abandoned planet. It was a place of ancient technology, a remnant of the long-lost civilization that had created the virus. The team descended into the depths, knowing that they were about to face their greatest challenge yet. The virus was not just an organism. It was a weapon, one that had been designed to transform, to evolve. But now, in the hands of the evolved humans, that weapon could be turned against itself. The final battle was nothing like any of the conflicts they had faced before. It wasn't just a fight for survival. It was a fight for the future of the galaxy itself. The evolved humans, working together, combined their powers in ways they had never done before, forcing the virus to confront its own nature. The battle was fierce, but in the end, the virus was defeated. Its source was destroyed, and its influence over the galaxy was broken. But even as the team stood victorious, they knew that the galaxy would never be the same. The virus had changed everything, and in doing so, it had forced humanity to evolve. The future was uncertain, but there was hope. The galaxy had survived, and humanity had emerged stronger than ever before. The evolved humans had found their place in this new world, not as threats, but as protectors. Together, they had overcome the darkness, and together, they would rebuild a galaxy united in hope.